Is free speech merely a symbolic thing, like a national flag or motto? Is it just one of many values that we balance against each other? Or is free speech fundamental, a right which, if not absolute, should be given up only in carefully defined cases? The answer is that free speech is indeed fundamental. It's important to remind ourselves why, and to have the reasons ready when that right is called into question. The first reason is that the very thing we're doing when we ask whether free speech is fundamental, exchanging and evaluating ideas, assumes that we have the right to exchange and evaluate ideas. When talking about free speech, or anything else, we're talking. We're not settling our disagreement by force or by tossing a coin. Unless you're willing to declare, in the words of Nat Hentoff, free speech for me but not for you, then as soon as you show up to a debate to argue against free speech, you've lost. It doesn't make sense to use free speech to argue against it. Those who are unconvinced by this purely logical reasoning can turn to an argument from human history. History tells us that those who claim exclusive possession of truths on religious or political grounds have often been shown to be mistaken, often comically so. Perhaps the greatest discovery in modern history, one that was necessary for every later discovery, is that we cannot trust the pre-scientific sources of belief. Faith, miracle, authority, fortune-telling, sixth sense, conventional wisdom, and subjective certainty are generators of error and should be dismissed. How, then, can we acquire knowledge? The answer is the process called hypothesis and testing. We come up with ideas about the nature of reality, and test them against that reality, allowing the world to falsify the mistaken ones. The hypothesis part of this procedure, of course, depends upon the exercise of free speech. It is only by seeing which ideas survive attempts to test them that we avoid mistaken beliefs. Once this scientific approach began to take hold early in the modern age, the classical understanding of the world was turned upside down. Experiment and debate began to replace authority as the source of truth. One important step along this path was Galileo's demonstration that the Earth revolves around the Sun, a claim that had to overcome fierce resistance. But the Copernican revolution was just the first in a series of events that would make our current understanding of the world unrecognizable to our ancestors. We now understand that the widely held convictions of every time and culture may be decisively falsified, doubtless including some we hold today, and for this reason we depend on the free exchange of new ideas. A third reason that free speech is fundamental to human flourishing is that it is essential to democracy and a guard against dictatorship. How did the monstrous regimes of the 20th century gain and hold power? The answer is that violent groups silenced their critics and opponents. And once in power, the dictatorship punished any criticism of the regime. This is still true of the governments of today known for mass killing and other brutal acts. Why did these regimes allow absolutely no expression of criticism? In fact, if tens of millions of suffering people act together, no regime has the power to resist them. The reason that citizens don't unite against their dictators is that they lack common knowledge, the awareness that everyone shares their knowledge and knows they share it. People will expose themselves to a risk only if they know that others are exposing selves to that risk at the same time. Common knowledge is created by public information. The story of the Emperor's New Clothes illustrates this logic. When the little boy shouted that the emperor was naked, he was not telling others anything they didn't already know, anything they couldn't see with their own eyes. But he was changing their knowledge nonetheless, because now everyone knew that everyone else knew that the emperor was naked. And that common knowledge encouraged them to challenge the emperor's authority with their laughter. We also use speech as a weapon to undermine not just those who are in power but bullies in everyday life. The demanding boss, the boastful teacher, the neighbors who strongly enforce trivial rules. It's true that free speech has limits. We may pass laws to prevent people from making dishonest personal attacks, leaking military secrets, and encouraging others to violence. But these exceptions must be strictly defined and individually justified. They are not an excuse to treat free speech as one replaceable good among many. and if you object to these arguments, if you want to expose a flaw in my logic or an error in my ideas, it's the right of free speech that allows you to do so.